I'm gonna start by showing my candle that I guess maybe kind of matches my nails right now, that I got for my birthday, and I love it so much. Um, yeah, it's like it's new. It's not old or anything, but it's obviously made as like a an old school pre-electricity candle, and I just love it. And I love lighting candles. It's a huge part of me kind of centering myself and staying. Um, I feel like it has a lot to do with intention. It's kind of like it reminds me to stay centered and present, and um, kind of reminds me of my intention. And yeah, I think I was talking to someone about if all candles should be scented candles, and I'm really enjoying not having scented candles and mostly having unscented candles. Um, yeah, I kind of like, yeah, I don't really want to keep talking about candle types and my relationship with candles, although I could make an entire like hour long video on that alone. Um, but I kind of just don't feel like doing that. Um, this is a very messy background right now. It's also not morning, it's afternoon right now. Um, mm, so I guess I didn't necessarily have to do this. I did post an article onto Substack about asteroids, specifically the current asteroid um, thing, where um, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of talk about this asteroid that is apparently supposed to hit in like 2032. And that, I mean, this has happened many times before where the odds are like, it's a 1 in 3 chance, or it's like, it's definitely coming for Earth. And then it just like gets less and less and less, and then everyone forgets about it. So, I mean, the thing I wrote up on Substack, I wrote pretty quickly, but it felt good. And I referenced the movie Don't Look Up, which the whole premise is like a meteor or an asteroid is destined for Earth and will like mean certain death for everyone, and there's kind of like no getting around it. And then what people do and what happens in those 6 months of knowing that Earth is no longer going to exist, kind of like what people do and how people cope. And um yeah, i I definitely went through a period of time where I had a lot of existential preoccupation. So, kind of like, especially during COVID, I think during COVID it really prompted it and catapulted it of, what's the meaning of life and why am I here and what am I doing? I went through a phase when I was much younger where that happened. So it wasn't like I'd never really experienced that major existential crisis. Um, so that leads me to believe that I probably will experience another one in the future. I just hope that I have more tools to not let it really consume me and make me feel like I need a complete life overhaul. So yeah, hearing about an asteroid coming for Earth that's going to like end us all hypothetically doesn't really it doesn't really like stress me out very much, because I feel like it wouldn't really change much about what I'm doing and the path that I'm on. Yeah, I don't think it changes that much. Um and I also feel like I used to feel like there's no such thing as the wrong path, because you're on because the path you're on is the one you're on, and it can't be wrong because you're on it. But I kind of almost feel like it what if it's almost better to feel like the path you're on is definitely the wrong path, because there's no such thing as the right path. So I almost wonder if there's like liberation in feeling like we are all inevitably on the wrong path in some form, because there's no such thing as a right path. I guess, why does it have to be right or wrong? It just is the path. But sometimes you need a little correction. Sometimes you need a little like overcorrection to think about it. I also really feel like sometimes the Zen mindset and like presence and all things enlightened can feel so oppressive and can feel so like if only you could be the most enlightened about your Zen. It's just not fun. It's like people who kind of put that on others. I feel like I've done that to people a lot too, especially when it like is like, the Zen Olympics of who is the most Zen and who is the most enlightened. It's just exhausting and it's not fun. And it kind of feels a little bit like it's coming from this place of distancing and protection, which is not very Zen, and it's not very Buddhist in its heart. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, that it's neither right nor wrong, it just is. Sometimes that's a lot of weight to put on our shoulders to always be in presence and Zen mindedness. Also, like, you can't be fully present all the time. If a mind was fully present all the time, that's like when people talk about people not having an inner monologue, an internal monologue. It's like if you're completely present at all times, there's no way you can have an internal monologue because you're only in that track, which I definitely have an overactive internal monologue, but I think it's good that we have at least something secondary to just reality. Like, isn't that where ideas come from? And isn't that where new things come from and new approaches and yada 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 yada? Like, for as much as my monkey mind feels like it's torture, it also brings a lot of good richness to my life, and I believe that a lot of the richness that we experience in the world comes from other people's monkey minds that are given a right to exist. I also think that that's inner child work, is not like berating ourselves for having intrusive thoughts or preoccupied thoughts or depressive thoughts, like not berating ourselves even more for feeling things in the first place and having divergent thoughts and allowing them to exist. And that's not, you can't like force yourself into presence. You can only be present with like wherever you are and whatever you're experiencing. I think I've talked on here a bunch now about about digital fentanyl, which is like TikTok and all the extensions of TikTok, specifically like scroll video and stuff, which I definitely consume sometimes more than others. And I feel like collectively maybe we are all maybe there is an element of presence that we get from being on our phones like that. And I think a lot of people like to call it stimming. I think it's more than that. I really think it's more than that. I think that sort of like doesn't give it the power of what it's offering the human experience. I think that we as people, because of the way that our society is structured and the way that most people are allowed essentially to spend their time, we are looking for tracks. Like, we are looking for tracks of thought essentially to engage, because a lot of work and a lot of value in society doesn't have meaningful interaction with others, whether that be conversation or passive. activity, I think just a lot of work and a lot of time spent is, um, yeah, kind of separate. I also separate from meaningful interaction like that. I also think that I also think that we are going through a massive like labor shift, which I'm not that's not a novel thought from me. That's like every I mean, that's pretty well documented that we're going through this massive shift of labor and we don't really know. There's a lot of people who are kind of like getting caught in the crosshairs of that. Um Although you could argue that throughout human history we're always going through labor shifts. So it's really just like about maybe you could put that back on the individual to say like how does an individual kind of um claim their story. But TikTok and other platforms like it um, exist because of eyeballs. And when I know I'm an eyeball, that is feeding um, the that platform, it makes me feel weird. And honestly, as someone who has this, I have started posting silly videos on TikTok because I have this whole concept of internet therapy, which I will talk about some other time on here. Um, but yeah, I've just kind of wanted to like have more of an experience of um, creating in those spaces and on those platforms, and and not just like in smaller ways, but like with actual video and getting likes to those videos, like even if it's I don't know, like 50 likes. It's not nothing. And it feels weird. It feels weird kind of like I mean, it feels kind of good, but it does feel very weird. And it feels weird for many different reasons, but one of the big reasons is because I will if I'm when I'm using TikTok or Instagram Reels or something like that, I feel sort of dissociated often, or I'll find myself feeling kind of dissociated, or I'll be hyper feeling like this hyper real type of thing, immersion or something like that. And I will have kind of like an awareness of liking something and it doesn't feel like I'm engaging with something real. Now because I'm like a smaller I'm like the smallest creator that could exist because I have like 3 videos with like 50 likes, let's say. Um Not to brag. um but that's like I think that people find that and they like there's something nice about like, oh, this is a real person, so if I like that, that is clearly a real person. But a lot of the time it doesn't feel like it's a real person. And even honestly, if you see a video that has like 100 likes or something like that, it still doesn't really feel like it's real because there is an element of anonymity built into the design of TikTok, and there's anonymity built into Instagram. They're inherently built with this anonymity into them. So it doesn't really feel like liking in a truer sense. It feels more like gamified, I guess. So knowing that I'm like, I mean, producing content or creating content and posting it is a way of I think for anybody who does and for me is a way of kind of like understanding if it is gamified. I know you agree that it's gamified. Like it's a way of re no, not reclaiming. I mean, there is an element of that, but like more than that, it's kind of like, well, if this is a game, I want to understand the different types of play. So creating content and producing content is a way of understanding that. But yeah, reclamation is also part of it too, where you're like, oh, I'm not, I, you know, allows you to feel some empowerment. It allows you to feel connection in a different way, which I think is important. For it's nice. I'm just like letting myself talk for as long as I want, and that's a very beautiful thing. For a really long time, I didn't use Facebook or Instagram. So, I mean, I didn't even have an iPhone. I held off on getting an iPhone for a really long time. This was a very long time ago, like a smartphone. And yeah, I didn't have Instagram for years. So, I think it was 2016 that I joined Instagram again. Like once when it first opened, when it first started, I got an account and I was like, this is interesting. And I was very involved in my photography at the time. So I was kind of like, oh, should be for photography. I should put my photography on here. And then it really very quickly became not about photography. It really was clear to me that it was not about photography. It didn't feel like it was a space that was for photography. I also think I remember that it did start with drugs, and that's how like Instagram started, was about selling drugs online. Hence the gram. But yeah, it didn't really feel like it was a space for sharing art, and it didn't feel like a creative space online. I thought that like Tumblr was a creative space online. I thought that Thought Catalog was a creative space online. I'd kind of like not really cared about blogging as much for a bit. I mean, blogging was always this thing that I wanted to dip my toe in, but then anytime I would start, I like lost any sort of discipline or momentum, and I just really wanted to be more experimental toward it than consistent. So I think the difference now here on Substack and with this is that I don't feel the need to be experimental with the format or the place, or even honestly, like this, I guess this practice isn't where I'm feeling like I have creative experimentation happening. I feel like I have other places in my life creatively and entrepreneurially that I am feeling experimental and excited about that. But this is more of like a discipline practice where I look forward to doing it every day. I feel comfortable with what it is, where it's going, and kind of like where it is at scale right now. And I'm comfortable with if it did have more people paying attention or following, I kind of feel like I would be able to walk with that. And if no one else wants to look at it, I'm very okay with that too. So it's really more just like a comfort practice for me, and it doesn't feel like an experimental space. So yeah, I mean, I just turned 33, so I'm 33 years old, and I started becoming interested in blogging and internet disclosure essentially when I was like 12 or 13. And it's taken 20 years. That means it's taken me 20 years to feel comfortable enough online, sharing myself publicly and sharing my ideas and whatever's in my brain. Yeah, it's taken me 20 years to feel comfortable doing that. And I actually kind of think that's cool. What is it that I needed to work out that took me that long to get to a point of being comfortable to do that? I recently reconnected with a very, 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 very old friend. Like just today we reconnected. Very old friend from childhood. Actually two childhood friends. But that was just so fascinating because we shared a love of a lot of things when we were kids. And one of those is music, so sharing a love of music. And I think we both also have similar journeys of having this like deep love, like almost like foundational spiritual love of music. And then also having kind of a fraught relationship with it where it wasn't, you know, like our careers that we focused our careers in. But now in adulthood, like wanting to make it more of a part of our lives. Uh-oh. Um, if this doesn't save, I'm gonna be so mad. So, yeah, it was just really comforting to connect with her and talk about the need to make music, specifically the need to sing, and how important it is to sing for us, and how we kind of feel like it's important for everybody, like for all humans and non-humans too. There's a lot of creatures that sing. So, um, yeah, it was just really heartwarming to remember that there's someone that I know that I have, you know, walked maybe some similar convergent paths with in life, and how we are in similar mindsets and spaces about our lived experience now too. And I think that came to mind because I was talking about taking essentially 20 years from being interested in internet virtual spaces where we disclose ourselves publicly, and kind of wanting to have that be a format for my own self-expression, and it taking 20 years to actually get to a point where I'm doing that in any sort of consistent fashion. I'm not going to talk about whether it's coherent or not, because that's not the point. It's more about consistency and comfort. And yeah, I think that my friend and I, that experience with music feels sort of similar, because, you know, what took so long to get to a point of being able to sort of let go of the preconception, or let go of the weight that comes along with whatever we might be caring about our voices or ourselves, or that being more of a part of ourselves. Essentially, it is that straightforward. What takes that long? And I think that the more important response is to, like, what took so long, is really just that question exists, and maybe thinking about the question but not feeling like there needs to be an answer to it, but more just kind of like thinking about it, and also appreciating that more. You can look at, you know, let's say 20 years. Well, you can look at 20 years and say, oh my God, how did I not have that part of my life as a part of my life for 20 years? Or where could I have been, or what could have developed, or whatever. But then it's missing the gratitude for having it now. And you don't really know what you know, from a music perspective, let's say, you can't write, if you had been writing songs for 20 years, you wouldn't be able to write now, or sing now, write what you can write now, sing, sound the way that you can sound now. You wouldn't have that. So yeah. Not to say that everything happens for a reason. It's not that. It's more just the message, the expression, the product, all of that is punctuated by the space, and is like a unique gift because of that space.